Alrighty, so we're going through Anime Week, and we're just talking about different anime and stuff I think about them, and how it relates to the real world. Because that's what this channel is all about. It's about the real world, real stuff. And so, I'm gonna actually talk about two anime that kind of portray this phenomenon pretty well. The first is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and the second is My Hero Academia. And pretty much what we're talking today about is family. About why you have families and, what the good thing is about them. Because I feel like a lot of people just forgot. A lot of people just don't understand why family is so important. Because for thousands of years it was so obvious, and now people have rationalized themselves out of it, which is weird. But that's kind of what's been happening on a lot of fronts. So I think anime is a good example of this because you get to see like the cranked up to 11 ultimate version of what's going on. So for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the show makes this obvious, right? That you start out with Jonathan Joestar, and he's the main character, and then he dies, right? Not really a spoiler, because, that's kind of how the entire show goes. But you see, here's the thing. He dies, but then he passes on his legacy to his son. And then eventually we follow Jonathan Joestar's grandson, Joseph Joestar. And then he does his stuff. And so on and so on. And it goes through many different generations, many different Joestars, and many different conglomerations, many different combinations. But the point being that with these generations, each JoJo, right? That's the whole joke of the show, is that everyone's name gets shortened to JoJo. Somehow, some way, they get called JoJo. So everyone has the same nickname. That every season there's a new JoJo to look at. And they have their own struggles, their own adventures. But what's really cool about that show is the context of their struggle has this backdrop of all of the preceding seasons we've seen, all of the previous Joestars that did stuff, that made stuff happen, that got their family to this point where they could have those struggles and surpass them and improve their own lives and those of the people around them. That without season 1, you don't get season 2. And without season 2, you don't get season 3. And without season 3, you don't get season 4. And that's how it goes, on and on. That the story builds up on each other, even though the characters change. Because each person gets their own chance to be in the story. Well, except for the son of Jonathan Joestar. He gets killed off screen. But but everyone else, every other Joestar gets a chance. They get to do something. They get to have impact and meaning. And that's Cool. And this is how the real world works. We don't have stands and we're not killing vampires, sure. But we have our lives and our stories to tell. And it's our turn to tell those stories. Our turn to achieve stuff and push things forward. So that way, our kids, our descendants, can look back at us and say, look at that, what they did. So that way I could stand here today and do what I'm doing. The reason I'm also including My Hero Academia in this is because they have the same thing. The main character's superpower is one for all, which essentially just says, hey, all he has is the strength of the previous generation, and all they had was the strength of the previous generation. And so on and so forth, until you trace it back to the one guy who was like total limp, right? That the story of One for All is this weak old guy is just like, oh man, my brother's super powerful and I can't do squat. And then the brother's like, oh, you know what? Here's a superpower for you. You can be a sponge. You can just soak up all the stuff that you're doing and stockpile. Just take all that and stockpile it. That's it. That's all you can do. So maybe one day, the joke being like, yeah, maybe one day you'll be something, right? Except he's able to pass it on to someone else. And then that person passes it on. And that person passes it on. And then that stockpiling ability, that adding on incrementally, that by the time it gets to the time period of the show where the current events are happening, the main character has like amazing superpowers, like strongest in the world. But all it took was for each generation to add just a little bit. They don't have to go crazy. They don't have to do amazing things. They just have to do their time, live, and add that next rung to the ladder. Give a little bit more. Add a little bit more. And then it accumulates. It builds. That is the whole point of One for All. Is that building. Incrementally, step by step. That's the whole point of family. You build generation upon generation, incrementally. It doesn't matter if you don't have to do those big, giant, sweeping growth spurts. You just teach your kids better than your parents taught you, because your parents taught you all these good stuff that is useful. And then you figured out, yeah, but this thing they did was dumb, right? And so you can do just a little bit better. Just that 5% better. But just like with One for All, that stockpiles, that builds. And so yeah, you're only making your kids slightly better than you were. But then they make their kids slightly better than they were. And so on and so forth. And that's how we got to this place where I'm talking to you over the internet. Because everyone stockpiled that ability, taught it, kept it going. Improved the lives of their children just a little bit. And then so on. And then so on. And then so on. And I think between these two shows, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and My Hero Academia, you see that effect of generations going on and going on, and each person, they may not be crazy significant in their own right. They may not have an amazing story that, impacts millions of people. But they put their time in, and they had kids and they passed it on. And that's the biggest thing you can do, is to pass on that gift. That you've been gifted with an absolute superpower built from thousands of years of your family. And the greatest thing you can do is to take that gift, that experience that only you have, and pass on all the gifts and filter out some of that bad stuff. And then you can have that fully distilled down goodness. And eventually, we'll get to a place where humanity is good. It'll probably take millions of years. But that's why we have kids. So that way one day, a future generation will have these problems figured out. We'll have fixed all of the issues. It's not going to happen anytime soon. It may never happen in actuality, because we have a tendency to create problems for ourselves. But that's the dream. Is just that those incremental improvements over time is all it takes. That is the one thing that separates us from the animals. It's because when we learn something, we teach it. We pass it on. And so it keeps living even after we're gone. That all of our efforts, they're not the material stuff we put together, the physical things we built. That's not our legacy. The legacy is all of the lessons and all the struggles we've had passed on to the next generation. And the most surefire, most direct, and the best way to do that is to have kids of your own. I mean, take me for example. I have 2 kids already, 1 on the way. And my daughter, it's kind of funny. She's a lot like me. Like a lot like me. And because she's a lot like me, all of the issues I had growing up, all of the things about me that I didn't understand, I have an opportunity to teach her before she even has those struggles. So that way, she can get over those hurdles faster, easier, better than I ever could. And then she can pass that on to her kids. And they can do even better than her. That every generation we learn, we grow, and then we pass it on to the next. We might make mistakes. We might have problems. But half of teaching is knowing what didn't work. Half of science and experiments is all the failures. that most of what you're going to do it will be a failure. You will fail time and time again. And each failure, each lesson learned, is added to your catalog of experience that you get to pass on. So your kids don't make those mistakes because you figured out why you made them. You figured out the lies that you were told, the bogus advice you got, how little helped people were. You went through all of that, and then you figured out what the problem was. And now that lesson is vital. It's important. And having kids gives you that chance to pass it on. That is the greatest thing a person can do. And I think anime shows it off pretty well. With flashy colors and cool stories. Because it's not something you can see. You can't see all of the generations that benefited from your struggles after you're dead. You don't get to see that. At least not here on Earth. And so, seeing that through the stories of anime is pretty cool. It's pretty inspiring. And so, go ahead. Have your struggles. Have your challenges. Have your kids. And that way, all of the things you've learned from all of your ancestors, you can pass it on. And you can keep this thing moving. Keep humanity becoming better and better every generation. That is worth something. That is worth doing. And that is something people forgot somehow. But hopefully now you are reminded.